Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We were just dealing with some technical difficulties, but we are back here. We were talking about the Chiefs' upset win against the Baltimore Ravens. When I left off, I was sort of highlighting some of the mental issues that the Ravens got in their own way with, and I ultimately think was the main reason why they lost this game. You can point to a coaching standpoint of not having them running the ball enough. You can point to Lamar Jackson, who wasn't able to elevate his game when it called for it the most. But I think that this game came down to the Ravens let their emotions get the best of them. They had the two penalties right before halftime during the Chiefs' final drive, where it looked like they were just about ready to go into halftime with a 14-7 lead. But then after a Kyle Van Noy unnecessary roughness penalty pushed them 15 yards, and then Travis Jones picked up a roughing the passer penalty that gave them another 15. They end up getting into field goal range, kicking the field goal there just to make things that much worse for the Ravens, you could put it. And then the, of course, now infamous Zay Flowers drive, where Zay Flowers, an incredibly talented young rookie receiver for the Ravens. I think that he is the best receiver that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have had up to this point. But he is clearly very young, and he played like it, specifically on that one drive where he picks up the taunting penalty after a long 50 or so yard reception against L'Jarius Sneed. And then L'Jarius Sneed comes back and punches the ball out as he dives for the end zone. And listen, I have never been a ball carrier in my life in the game of football. When I played, I was a lineman, so I can't imagine how tempting it must be to try and reach out for that end zone and score a touchdown. I'm sure there's nothing like scoring a touchdown, but I think that time and time again, it's been shown to us as football fans, and I'm sure there are much smarter people within the actual team facilities than me, saying the risk reward in situations such as that just never call for reaching out for that end zone. At the time for them, it was 2nd down and 8. He had the first down. It would have been 1st and goal if he was tackled on the 1-yard line. Yes, you want it for yourself, but you have to think of the team, because instead he fumbles and into the end zone it goes. The Chiefs pick the ball up, and it ends up being a touchback, so it's not even like you have them fully backed up in position where you could possibly get a safety. It's just the Chiefs' ball. And then on this second to last Ravens drive, the Chiefs do a great job covering up the punt, which sets the Ravens up on their own 1-yard line. And at this point, it just really felt like a huge legacy drive for Lamar Jackson. And I said that going into the drive, and it almost felt unfair just because of how backed up they were in their own territory, that I thought that it really, the odds were stacked against him from the beginning, but he ends up putting together a really good drive. He's throwing out to the flats. He's just taking what the defense is giving him. They're sort of inching their way up. They actually go to the run game for one of the only times this season on a 3rd down and pick up a 1st down with Gus Edwards. And then something downfield finally opens up for them with Nelson Aguilar running open across the middle of the field. Lamar finds him for a 39-yard reception. But it was at that point where Lamar just got, I think, 2 in his own head. At that point, you are down 10 points. You just need to score in some capacity to keep yourself alive. You're down to the Kansas City 25-yard line. You're an easy field goal range for Justin Tucker, one of the best kickers in NFL history. And after that Aguilar reception, Lamar just got a little bit greedy, I think. He goes deep for OBJ, overthrows him a little bit, but OBJ, again, if this is the maybe very early on OBJ, he maybe makes that spectacular catch, but they can't connect on that one. And then this next play, which, talking about mental mistakes, I think that this was one of the biggest that he possibly could have made. He throws it into triple coverage for Isaiah Likely, who was calling for the pass, but I don't know what he was looking at. I guess maybe if he put it over all three defenders and makes an unbelievable throw, then yeah, Likely sort of could have been open, but it was just a bad decision and then a bad throw. He significantly underthrows him, and it is an easy interception for the Chiefs. The game was just about wrapped up from that moment. Yes, they did actually potentially have a chance to stay alive because, again, their defense was just so good that even after that point, they forced the Chiefs to punt, and then they come back with a field goal drive. So the Chiefs get the ball. If their defense can hold up, they get another chance at it, but even then, the odds are stacked against them. They would need a touchdown, and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are able to close that one out for them. So it was, I think, really heartbreaking for the Ravens, just all things considered. You finally get this AFC Championship game to be at home. I think that this was their best possible situation for them, and they aren't able to get it done, which sort of brings us into this next conversation of what do we do as NFL fans going forwards when trying to evaluate Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, because they were granted just about a golden opportunity this year. They had an incredible defense. They had new, younger guys sort of step up and be key contributors for them. They made the right moves around the edges, trading for Roquan Smith at the trade deadline last year. They draft Zay Flowers in the first round this year. Again, finally hit on one of these wide receivers. Matabike has a breakout year. Kyle Hamilton has a breakout year on their defense. Their defense is an absolute wagon. Number one scoring defense in the league, number one takeaway defense in the league, and ultimately they don't get it done on offense. So what do we really do here? Because Lamar Jackson is now going to be a two-time MVP. He's going to be a two-time MVP and have a 2-4 postseason record. And the way that NFL and sports discourse as a whole goes is the regular season has probably never meant less than it does now. And while I don't think that that's totally fair, because in reality, I think that it is obviously the building grounds for these players making the next steps, for them establishing themselves as stars during the regular season. It's a larger body of work. But at the same time, that's all in order to be ultimately crowned the championship winner of the league. And now Lamar Jackson's in a tricky position here where everybody knows that he is ultra talented, that he's a great player, that the Ravens are a good organization. But the question is, what's wrong with them? Why, despite all these great things, it was 11 wins, including their playoff win, of teams that finished above 500. That was a historic mark for the Ravens, but still fall short. And your MVP, again, I don't want to make it sound like this game should all be on his hands. It's definitely an indictment on the coaching staff as well for not being able to put together the right game plan and to take control of this team that was sort of losing their minds a little bit mentally, and just get them back to what they're best at, which is running the ball, which is being patient and grinding your opponents down. and they couldn't do that. So for Lamar himself, I think that it's interesting. Immediately as this game ends, social media is just talking about him nonstop. It is the questions about what I saw. One that really stuck out to me is, what is his NBA comp? I think that I'm obviously big football guy, big basketball guy, and overwhelming it was Joel Embiid or James Harden. I like the Embiid comparison more because of the age, because of the career arc. I think that James Harden, he's been in the postseason enough now at this point, especially at an older age, where if he was going to show that he is a postseason guy, he's had plenty of opportunities. Between both Embiid and Lamar, I think that it is not quite that simple because they're both still pretty young. And I know that, young, it's not like they're on rookie contracts. They've both gotten their max extensions, but they still have plenty of time to sort of reverse some of these narratives. These are two guys where injuries have sort of derailed them. We know the talent, but when it comes to down the stretch, I don't think they've been in good situations, but not at all times great. So I think that there is a lot that goes into that comparison. I don't want to harp on it for too long, but really when you think of the overall scheme, you take names out of it, what do we view Lamar Jackson and Joel Embiid as? We view them as all-time talents, extremely talented, going to go down in the history books for their respective leagues. But up to this point, questions about whether or not they can get it done in the highest pressure of situations in consecutive weeks, series in the NBA case, and for a month or so, put together a string of consecutively great performances. And if that's unfair, it's because for a little bit it is, but that's also just the amount of pressure that comes with the territory, I think. So for Lamar going forward, I'm not going to say their championship window is closed. This was just about as perfect of a situation as you could get, with your defense being as good as they were, with Joe Burrow in your division getting injured, Deshaun Watson to that point as well. I know he's not necessarily the level of these other guys, but I mean, even Kenny Pickett, like all of the starting quarterbacks in their division were injured. The Chiefs were not the Chiefs that we have seen up to this point. They're maybe building something with Rashee Rice, and there's still definitely developments that the Ravens can have on offense. Getting either J.K. Dobbins or Keaton Mitchell back in their backfield and having a more effective run game. But again, it's a matter of coaching, not actually sticking to your identity in that sense. And for Lamar, can't imagine you can keep him out of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Joe Burrow, it's Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson is, Patrick Mahomes is on his own tier. I think he is S tier, 1, whatever you want to call it. I think Lamar falls into that directly next category of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. Because yes, Joe Burrow has been to a Super Bowl, but Josh Allen as well. How much have any of those guys truly accomplished in the postseason? It's just Mahomes has absolutely dominated that conference since he's become a starter. He has been to the AFC Championship game every year. He's been a starter. This is 6 years now. That's Tom Brady stuff right there. And Tom Brady, throughout his career, was a guy that was able to kind of put some of his competitors of his generation's quarterbacks down a notch and sort of limit their success. That's what Mahomes is doing right now. Now, Joe Burrow is the one who has actually come out and beat Mahomes. But that being said, that's 1 in 6 years. The only quarterbacks that have beat him in the AFC are Joe Burrow and the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. So, just for this Lamar conversation, I guess to just sort of put a bow on it, I know that this was a disappointing loss for them, but that's kind of just what it's been like for the Bills for all these years, having disappointing losses. And I know that Josh Allen catches his level of flack as well. And you know what? Josh Allen in his matchup against the Chiefs was better than Lamar Jackson in his matchup against the Chiefs. But I think that it's fair to highlight that Lamar Jackson is extremely talented, but he is, for that segment of the NFL fans who put so much stake in postseason success versus anything else, he does have to sort of prove himself in that moment. And at this point, it's beating Patrick Mahomes, it's making it to a Super Bowl, and you know, we know that he's more than capable of going out on a week-to-week basis in the regular season and putting on a show. He can do so in the playoffs as well. In individual performances, I think that he was really good against the Texans defense. And I know the Texans defense is young. The leadership between quarterback and coach is young with that team. But Lamar Jackson was really good in that game as well. So it's not for a lack of talent, but it sort of becomes the conversation of, does this guy have a chance of being an all-timer? And I think that with his resume already, he's probably bound to be heavy Hall of Fame contention with multiple MVPs once he is officially awarded it at the end of this season, likely. But I think that all in all, he's going to have more chances. I know it's easy to say, well, this was their only chance, and you know, you have it at home, you have Mahomes on the road, you have the number one scoring defense, but sort of like Dan Campbell was talking about, you never know when you're going to get back, and that goes for every other team in the AFC, such as Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, despite them making it look like the opposite. So I don't think it's panic mode on Lamar Jackson whatsoever, but I do think that the unfortunate side effect of what went down in yesterday's game means he's going to have another 10, 11 months of sort of having the doubters surrounding him. And I think it's a little unfortunate, but at the same time, that's just what happens. These NFL playoff games, it really is such a small sample size. You think about, especially in comparison to the NBA, where you get these 7-game series, you have multiple chances to prove yourself. One game doesn't go the way that you hope it does, and you have to live with that decision until the playoffs come around the next year. And it's not that I thought Lamar Jackson was terrible, but the offense did not produce enough. And as the leader of that offense, you are going to be held accountable. So, yeah, I think that we can all agree Lamar is just about a top 5 quarterback in the league, but there's more to prove there. And there's probably more room for growth for him as well. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just a reminder, we're here every day from 2 to 3 p.m., so be sure to tune back in tomorrow as we continue to dive into the weight of the NFL playoffs here going forward. Thank you again for joining, and we'll be back tomorrow.